The failure of the criminal justice system to stem women abuse. That's what scores of EFF women members in Gauteng highlighted today during a march to the police and the NPA headquarters. It's the second march the EFF has embarked on to raise awareness around the abuse of women in the country.
Joyce Minare hails from Alexandra, north of the city. She's a victim of domestic violence, but police, seemingly inept or dismissive of such women who report to them.
I'm here now. I did go to court. I've been beaten. So when I'm supposed to open the case, they told me, no, you mustn't open the case. You must open the protection order. I say, why? Because I've been beaten, I've been harassed, and the guy is not my child. The guy is not my husband, but I should open a protection order. Instead of opening the case, they said, no, open the protection order so that he must be away from you, so that immediately when he comes to you, we can arrest him. I don't understand our police.
South Africa records one of the highest gender-based violence stats in the world. Very few cases are reported because women have to tackle a bureaucratic criminal justice system. The system is often peppered with inept officials. This prompted the EFF to march.
Following the 18 April march to the Constitutional Court, we needed and we made a commitment on that day to all the women that we would follow up with the rest of the value chain of the criminal justice system, being the South African Police Service, the National Prosecutions Authority, the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, the Public Protector, but we specifically added the Gender Commission on Equality for obvious reasons, but also to make sure that they are aware of what our demands are. So it's a continuation and an ongoing program to attack the criminal justice system fully and on a consistent basis.
The EFF says the criminal justice system needs genuine reform. As August month draws to a close, the EFF in Gauteng hopes for the plight of women to be highlighted. They want the criminal justice system to be strengthened in order for South African women to be protected. Natasha Piri, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, the chair of the Economic Freedom Fighters in Gauteng is Mandisa Mashego. She's with me now. Mandisa, good evening. Thanks so much for coming in.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting the EFF to your show.
What point are you making with this march?
Well, remember we marched on the 18th of April to the Constitutional Court, and we made a promise that we need to complete the cycle or the circle and see the rest of the state agencies that are responsible for, meting out justice administratively and otherwise throughout the system. And so that was partly for that reason. But secondly, of course, it's Women's Month, and it's important to make a substantive, tangible statement. And so the two just interlinked. But reality is that on a daily basis, as you know and you understand, black women and young black women specifically, and I mentioned the Palisa Madiba case to you earlier when we spoke on radio, and the conversation didn't end that well, but I'm still here and you're still here, so we have to continue.
And we shook hands when you came in.
Nonetheless, so, in light of what happens to young black women and black women in general, and then women overall, and of course the LGBTQI and people living with disabilities at the hands of the criminal justice system in South Africa is really, really a dire situation. In fact, it needs urgent attention. And so our march was about that, but mainly giving very simple but tangible demands to each and every one of the entities we marched to, like we did to the Constitutional Court, and giving more emphasis and impetus to the demands we gave to the Constitutional Court, because you understand they are interlinked, and you can't march to the SAPS without the NPA, without IPID, without the Public Protector and everybody else. You have to have a conversation with all of them because they need to correct themselves urgently at very specific levels throughout the system.
Everyone controls about problems in the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
We hear about it all the time.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a structural problem? In other words, there would be evidence that it particularly seems to fail women, and particularly black women. Do you think there's something wrong with the entire structure of it? Or is it just the people who are making these decisions? Many of the people are female police officers. The NPA, the head of the NPA is a woman.
Look, and this is another issue that I take issue with, the issue of fronting and putting a woman, you know, in a position and then say, no, we have a woman. And also saying, you know, we have so many MPs who are females and all of that. That's not the point. Because when you look at the statistics in South Africa, economically and socio-economically, the most depressed are black women. And within the young black women category, the unemployment figure is really dire, hovering in the 60th percentile. So fronting and window dressing with females is not the issue. There are systemic, endemic, persistent, stubborn problems in the police. The NPA have got their own brand of problems. The courts, I mean, even the mentality that we are not allowed to criticize the court is undemocratic in and of itself, because what it essentially means is that you must accept anything that happens in the courts. And we know that during apartheid, for instance, the courts were far from perfect. So the issue is not that you cannot criticize the courts and that you should not. You must. The issue is to allow them to sustain and maintain their independence. But that doesn't mean you can't criticize them. And so there are systemic problems, fundamental problems in the criminal justice system, you know, such as the policing no problem with saying to you when you come to a police station, you can't open a case, you know, making judgment on a matter which they don't have authority to do. Only a court can do that. And the NPA often presenting cases in front of judges and magistrates that are not properly investigated. They can see themselves that, look, I'm sitting with a case that is not winnable, and they don't have, you know, somehow it looks like there's no communication between one entity of the criminal justice system and the next, and that must stop. But ultimately, it's the anti-black and anti-black woman attitude of the South African criminal justice system that we no longer can tolerate.
There is an argument around a sort of climate of patriarchy, the idea of what men say and get away with, and male leaders.
Yeah.
There's been commentary about the EFF leaders, male leaders recently. I must say, I mean, if we look through the recent last 10 years or so, it's not just the EFF, there are other political leaders from other parties that could be accused of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes the idea is that male leaders create a climate or allow a climate or incite even, I don't know if that's too strong, but that's the claim. Yeah. How do you respond to that? I mean, look, you are a woman, you're a senior woman, a provincial leader, chairman, in the EFF in this climate.
Look, the critical issue to first understand is that South Africa has a patriarchal problem. And for us as black women, that problem also takes on a racial, you know, complexion. If you go to the private sector, I had a journalist not so long ago reach out to ask for help because of a sexual harassment incident she experienced at one of the very big print media companies. And the first thing I said to her was that, no, make sure you apply the sexual harassment policy to the T, so that by the time we help you to take the matter outside, they don't complain that you didn't follow procedures. She says, no, they don't have one. But how many times was the EFF hammered about not having a sexual harassment policy, or whether we have one, whether we don't have one? And 100-year-old organizations don't have them. I'm giving an example. So patriarchy and racism mixed together become a dangerous weapon against development and progress for black women in particular, which is why you see the situation that I was explaining earlier. And so it's important to accept that there's patriarchy everywhere. Here at the SABC, as we are sitting here, we are governed by a patriarchal system, not just in South Africa, but globally. And so why do you expect EFF members to suddenly be free from patriarchy? But in all honesty, I made this example earlier. I was elected in an EFF conference that we call an assembly, made up of men and women. And I was elected by men. And I don't understand that if the patriarchy in the EFF in particular is supposed to be of a special nature, that it is supposedly so deep, why would EFF members elect females? Even at branch level, we have many female chairpersons, even in regional structures. So the reality is that I don't have to sit and defend anything. Patriarchy exists all over society. In fact, it starts in your home, because often you subject your wives and your girlfriends and your sisters and your mothers to all this misogynistic nonsense as South African men, and you actually think it's funny sometimes. You even make snide comments in public and you think it's okay. So if and when there's a comment made by an EFF male leader that is perceived to be sexist, there's no problem. You should just call it out on the spot. We are not going to defend it. But the reality is also that by the way, there's no president in this country of a political party that we all know who confronts and attacks patriarchy in South Africa than Julius Malema. And I don't have to, say that because I'm an EFF leader, but it's a fact. I've never heard Cyril Ramaphosa,
for the second time today, we're going to run out of time.
Or Musi, attack patriarchy openly and consistently.
Mandisa Maseko, thanks very much indeed. Really do appreciate you coming in. The Gauteng chairperson of the Economic Freedom Fighters.